Hello. What I have here is a representation of the head and the brain. I've been reading a lot of stuff by Shirzad Chamine recently and also taken a course that he offers. And in it, he describes the fact that there's actually four parts of the brain. There's the primitive brain stem area here, which is responsible for all your automatic bodily functions and behaviors. They just happen without you paying them any attention, like your blood circulating and your breathing, etc. You've got the mammalian brain, which is the sort of middle brain here, which is all about keeping us safe, and fight and flight dwells in that part of the brain mainly. And you've also got then the human neocortex part of the brain, which is actually two bits, left and right hemispheres. And that's where all the the behaviors you need for being successful occur. So things like being innovative, empathizing with people, developing and planning actions and actually doing them. So the secret is you want to spend more time thinking in the higher part of the brain and less time being sort of emotionally driven and controlled by your saboteurs down here and fight and flight. So what he talks about are 10 mental saboteurs here, which destroy any hopes you have of achieving worthwhile things and being successful. And then you've got 5 sage factors up here, which if you can access them, they're the factors you need to access in order to be successful. So here it's things like being innovative, being able to empathize with people, being able to make plans, see them through to their conclusion, actually implement them. Now, the secret is that when you're under stress, you produce a chemical called cortisol. And what that does is it activates these lower parts of the brain, which means it activates your fight and flight response, and it activates all the sort of emotional behaviors and the things that stop you actually doing things, like stop you being proactive, stop you actually taking, calculated decisions, I suppose, risks, if you like. Whereas if you can get into this part of the brain here, that's where you will actually make plans and implement them and not be swayed by, negative emotions. And that the way you do that is to get the brain producing what's called dopamine rather than cortisol. Now, what this is all leading to is that there are strategies that you can implement, or things that you can do to actually ensure that you produce dopamine, which gets you up here, rather than producing cortisol down here whenever something happens that's not according to plan. So if something unfortunate or something you don't like happens, there are ways to actually avoid going down what are called neural pathways to automatically go here and trigger off destructive behaviors, saboteur behaviors. And there are things you can do to actually take you up into the sage areas here, where you basically put things into context and you take the setbacks in your stride and you still be successful. And he calls these things PQs, which is to do with, his book's called Positive Intelligence, and the Q stands for Positive Intelligence quotient, just like IQ. So there are things you can do. He calls them PQ reps, but basically there are behaviors you can implement to mean that you don't go here and you do go up there, which is where you want to be. And it's very similar to mindfulness. So anything where you're actually paying close attention to the actual moment, to what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, gets your dopamine part of the brain working, which takes you into the sage area, rather than the cortisol taking you into the emotionally driven fight and flight area, the angry area, the negative passions area. So things like mindfulness work, that's where, very similar to that is NLP anchors. They're a similar sort of thing. You can actually do things that take you into the right sort of behavior. Now, where this is leading to is it also helps if you're mixing with the right sort of people who also want to set goals, want to be successful, want to implement those goals. And one of the areas you can go for there is what's called a mastermind group. And it's why Napoleon Hill calls the mastermind group one of the 13 key steps to riches. So if you wanted to know more about how being part of a mastermind group or a brains trust or whatever you care to call it, where everybody in the room is committed to helping each other set ambitious goals and then hold each other accountable to help them achieve them, have a look at businessroundtableuk.co.uk and it'll explain the idea. So as a recap, what you want is when something happens that could set you back, whatever it is, then rather than be driven automatically into areas down here of destructive behavior led by what he calls your mental saboteurs, if you've got techniques that you can follow to make you produce dopamine and take you into the sage areas up here, and you develop their neural pathways, you develop new habitual ways of reacting to setbacks, that you react to them positively by doing this, then that's where success is, and that's where, you know, being sidetracked and blown off course and failure lies here. So you need to develop new neural pathways, which are habits basically, which mean that when you get something as a stimulus coming in that could set you back, instead of going down here and reacting negatively, you produce dopamine, which takes you up here and you react positively. I hope you found that. I mean, I think that's a fascinating area, and I hope you found that interesting too. And if you ever wanted to have a conversation about how it all works and, you know, how it might work for you, then I'd be delighted to. No strings attached. If you fancy a conversation, always happy to have a one-to-one. But also have a look at this, businessroundtableuk.co.uk. Hope you found that as interesting as I find it. Thank you very much for watching.